Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I have some awesome news to share with you before we get started tonight. Thanks to you, our dedicated viewers, the Tennessee Informer has reached its very first major milestone. We could not have done it without your loyalty, encouragement, and support and commitment to the truth. Now we're excited to announce that you can help support the show even more directly through super chats, super stickers, and super thanks. Every bit of support goes right back into growing this platform and ensuring we continue to bring you bold, uncompromising coverage. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. We both appreciate this, me and the producer Kevin, and we couldn't be happier. We couldn't do this without you. Now let's get on to the show. America is in a war with the communists, as this administration has started to acknowledge. They're finally going after Antifa and their financial backers. We are a nation in a series of ongoing crises that threaten our survival. These crises all have common themes and like-minded entities that want to destroy America and Western civilization. The war began over 100 years ago, and tonight we will identify who is behind these manufactured crises and what we can do about it with our guest, James Simpson, author of the book, Manufactured Crises, The War to End America. But first, it's time for the Informer Report. President Trump now says Ukraine could possibly win back all its territory, that Russia is a paper tiger, and that NATO should shoot down Russian planes that violate NATO airspace. The Sept has also called all of the senior military leaders to a meeting. What is going on? Why the change? And when did Ukraine become our problem? He definitely had the right idea about this initially of not being sucked into a war in support of Ukraine or anybody for that matter. I don't know where we're headed, but I don't have a good feeling about this. It is not good. Trump gave a great speech at the UN and called upon the European countries that have allowed themselves to be overrun by illegal aliens, most of whom are Muslim, by the way. He also called out the UN over the climate scam that we are still experiencing. My question is, why are we still even in the UN? I don't know. I don't understand why we support that entity. I understand we've cut some of the funding, but I don't know why we allow it to function on our soil or why we are still members. They're anti-American. They don't do anything to support our initiatives unless we're paying them well for it. It's past time to get out of the UN. The National Guard troops deploying to Memphis, from the last word I got, will be unarmed. That is insane. I don't understand why Bill Lee would send them there. If it's dangerous enough, if the situation is bad enough to send a guard, you cannot send them unarmed. Let's hope this doesn't become a glorified police call under the direction of Governor Lee. Speaking of Bill Lee, his lack of transparency on the voucher issue, he claims that all 20,000 vouchers valued at $7,300 were reserved. We're not sure exactly what reserved means. There were 42,000 applications statewide. Half went to families meeting specific family income guidelines. The others were distributed without regard to income. In that first category, the limit was a family of 4 with an income of up to $173,000, well above the median income of most Tennessee families. That gives credence to the idea that the vouchers would be a subsidy to those already enrolled in private schools. The administration hasn't released any information on who is receiving the vouchers, and keep in mind, too, that private schools do not have to accept the vouchers. It's estimated that over the next 5 years, the program could add $1 billion to our education costs. All of this to violate the state constitutional requirement of funding public education. This voucher scam epitomizes the Lee administration. Deceptive. JDS is what the next topic will be. JDS is, this is something I created. It's Jewish derangement syndrome, kind of like Trump derangement syndrome. There's some people who have Trump derangement syndrome that anything and everything he does is great. And then there's other people who have the TDS of everything he does is wrong. I mean, he can do nothing right. Well, it's kind of similar with JDS. There's some people who think they have the variation of JDS that we have to support Israel in all cases at all times. And, the Bible says that God will bless those who bless Israel, and therefore, whatever they do, we have to bless them, especially with tax dollars. And then the other crowd is they can do nothing right. Anything and everything Israel does, or anything and everything a Jew does, is wrong. And they're the source of all evil in the world today. Well, I don't fall into either one of those categories. I will say this. I don't believe, and let me bring up something here that a lot of people have talked about lately, AIPAC, American Israeli, I can't remember what it calls for. This is a lobbying arm of Israel. But if your problem is that it's AIPAC, that the I stands for Israel, I think that's the wrong problem to have. The problem should be that we have anybody lobbying our Congress for a foreign country, any foreign country. I don't care if the I stands for Ireland. People should not be lobbying our Congress for a foreign country. Even if it's an American organization, to me, it's wrong to lobby for a foreign. That should be done through diplomatic channels. You know, we have treaties that are approved, but this lobbying, it's a problem. It's not just a problem because it happens to be AIPAC. It's a problem, period. I don't think that we should be tied to other countries. I think Washington had some good advice. Avoid entangling alliances. And we really need to do that right now. We're $37 trillion in debt. We cannot afford to continue to police the whole world. And I really do not understand why we care about what goes on in Gaza. That's not our problem. Let the Israelis handle it. That's my thought on that. Now, I understand there was earlier today, the president announced, and Netanyahu was there with him, they announced that they have a plan for Gaza. And President Trump said that, this would be eternal peace for the Middle East, which is probably the first sign it will ultimately fail, but maybe, just hopefully, it will work for at least a little while. It requires Hamas to de-radicalize. Not sure how that's going to happen. And of course, they're going to have to give up all the weapons. They can't have anything with the government, have anything to do with the government. Israel's going to pull out, and then the hostages will be released. A new international body is going to come in and govern Gaza. And President Trump is going to head the board. Per request, he's going to head the board. I thought we elected him to be president, not to be the head of an international board. So we'll see how that goes. It would be nice if it stopped what was going on right now. But, oh, by the way, I want to hit that a little bit more. This with the JDS. I hear a lot on the right now, they sound like the far left. Because every time they talk about Israel, you hear occupiers, Zionist, genocide. 65,000, this is the latest number, if it's accurate, 65,000 have been killed in 2 years in Gaza. Gaza is very heavily populated. They got millions of people, and it's really tight. If the best that the Israelis can do in 2 years is 65,000, and they're actually attempting genocide, then they're not very good at genocide. I mean, it's insane. So just make sure that that you don't have JDS. It's not good to have either variation of JDS, not the variation that says anything and everything they do is fine and that we should give them money, or the JDS that says anything and everything they do is wrong and that they are the source of all evil in the world today. So just kind of check yourself. I could go on about that, and I probably will do another segment on that, but I don't have the time tonight to go into it. That wraps up this installment of the Informer Report. If you have a news story that you want to alert us to, be sure to send an email to tninformer.tv@gmail.com. Now a little bit about our guest, James Simpson. He's an economist, an investigative journalist, successful businessman, and author who formerly worked under Presidents Reagan, the first Bush, and Clinton in the White House Office of Management and Budget. His articles and research work have been published in numerous outlets, including American Thinker, Breitbart, Capital Research Center, the Daily Caller, Epoch Times, The Federalist, PJ Media, Washington Times, and elsewhere. He's written 7 books as well. His latest, Manufactured Crises, The War to End America, describes in detail the many crises deliberately created or magnified by our enemies over the past 100 years to destroy our nation. Mr. Simpson is also featured in the documentary, The Enemies Within, the award-winning agenda, Grinding Down America. as well as others. He's a public speaker and regular guest on radio and talk TV shows around the nation. He ran for U.S. Congress in 2020, and in 2022 was a candidate for the Maryland State Legislature. Boy, do they need some conservatives up there. He's also a Maryland State Police certified pistol instructor. His website is crisisnow.net. Jim, thank you for joining us tonight. How are you doing?
Hey, Dave. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I read a good bit of the book, and I skimmed through the rest of it. This is the most information-filled book, especially for its size, on all the different threats we face internally that I've ever seen. I've followed a lot of the different issues over the years, and like we were talking earlier, you might see 2 or 3 different topics in one book, and that might be a pretty big book. But this, in under 400 pages, you touch, I'm just going to hit some, the communists, the Antifa, Cloward Piven, the housing crisis, illegal immigration, the LGBT agenda, child suicide, Agenda 2030, election integrity, red, green, you cover all that in this book. I mean, this thing is a primer, especially for somebody who maybe is not aware of all these different things. This would be the best book to give anybody, say, here, let me show you what's going on in our country. And it is all right there in that one book. I mean, obviously there's more details you can find in others, but it's a great book. I definitely recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and that's why I wrote it, because Victor Davis Hanson, in the introduction of the book, he says, there's too many things going on today for them all to be coincidental.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of the outlook of the general public. Well, what the heck is going on? And he nailed it by saying, this is not all coincidence. But, that is actually it's kind of surprising that that's where he is in thinking about this, because the fact of the matter is we've known for a long, long time, at least I have, and he probably has for quite a while too, that all of the different radical left agendas have one purpose and one purpose alone. Well, excuse me, 2. One is to destroy our country, and 2 is to take power, take it over, and then enjoy all the benefits thereof. They always talk about how the Democrats, all they want is power. No, they want power and the wealth and all the other goodies that go with it without earning any of it. They just want to confiscate it all from the people who have actually produced the wealth and then and go to town and enjoy it. And that's really what they want. It's all about power and wealth, and it's the oldest motivation since the Garden of Eden. Ye shall be as gods, and that's their motivation.
Yeah, it's almost like a monarchy mindset, and a lot of their followers are convinced that they're going to be in the upper echelon. If they're not going to be the king or queen, they're at least going to be on the court. I don't think it's going to turn out that well for some of them when it's all said and done. But we've got some slides to go along with this. We're not going to do death by PowerPoint, but I do want to go ahead and cover some of these and just get started. And let's start with the whole communist design and planning. You hit some of it right there, but let's get to. I think there's a key figure in here that we need to talk about, because he kind of set the standard for what they want to do and how they want to do it.
Yeah.
And so we'll go to that. There we go.
There he is. Yeah. This is Sergei Nechayev. He's the most important radical that no one's ever heard of. And I'll tell you, most historians never heard of him. He was the head of the Russian nihilist society, and he was a hardcore anarchist to the point where he murdered one of his associates for not being radical enough. This other guy didn't want to do all of the kinds of things that Nechayev wanted to do, and so he murdered him. His excuse was the guy was spying for the police, but it wasn't true. And so that's the kind of person he was. And he wrote something called the Revolutionary Catechism. It's a 3-page pamphlet which became the blueprint for communist revolution everywhere. Now, And here's what he says in the introduction. He says, all they care about is the happiness, the liberation and happiness of the masses. However, in order to achieve that happiness, there first has to be an all-destroying revolt. So towards that end, the revolutionaries will do everything they can to increase the miseries and the evils of the people until at last their patience is exhausted and they're driven to revolt. So what he summarizes there is what we have been living through, right. Which it doesn't matter what agenda you're talking about, whether you're talking about immigration, whether you're talking about the transgender issue, doesn't matter. All of these things are provocations. Right. They're trying to create so many problems, create so many overwhelming problems that we just lose it. And they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
They've done a pretty good job up to this point. Even, for example, the J6 thing. There were some people on our side who were really angry and wanted to see Mike Pence overturn, reject the electors, which he actually had every constitutional right to do, but he was always a chicken. He was always,
he showed his true colors showed.
He was a finger to the wind conservative,
Right.
And he proved it when he attacked General. When he attacked his subordinate, General Flynn, and got him thrown out without even looking at the evidence.
Right.
But no, it's nothing. Oh, and J6 was nothing but a classic communist provocation technique. In the war between the Nicaraguan Sandinistas and the Contras, you remember that, right? In the 1980s?
Yep.
The Sandinistas would dress up. They'd get their special forces guys to dress up as Contras, and then they would attack a Sandinista outpost and brutally murder everybody there in the most ghastly ways. And then they bring in the Western press, which of course uncritically said, oh my God, this is what the Reagan supported Contras are doing. It's the exact same kind of thing.
Yep.
They create this situation, they provoke people, they funneled everybody that came up to the Capitol into a place where they couldn't escape. And then they began throwing smoke bombs at them and began firing rubber bullets at them.
Yep.
And those people panicked.
Yep.
And there were many Antifa guys dressed up like Trump supporters, like MAGA people, who were the ones who were actually provoking most of the violence.
Right.
And
they said today 274 FBI agents were undercover. That came out either today or yesterday. And so that's part of, in my mind, that's part of the communists you're talking about.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And under Comey, who said he was a communist and then he said he couldn't make up his mind. Well, Comey, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
Yeah.
And so Comey, really an evil, very corrupt individual, and I think remains a committed communist, like, unfortunately, a lot of the upper echelons of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and in many other federal, state, and local government bureaucracies, because that's been their goal for us.
Absolutely. Let's go back to the catechism for a minute, because it's got some points that everybody needs to see here, the summary of it.
Yep. Penetrate all segments of society, pretending to fit in while plotting destruction. Attacking property rights, traditional society, Judeo-Christian values and morality, the family especially, creates so much chaos and division that Western society declares war on itself.
And that's where we're at right now. Would you agree?
That is where we are right now. And then when they take power, he included a very detailed order of execution to exterminate all people not useful to the communists. And it goes by a hierarchy. And it gets down, there's very few people living in our country today who would not go into one of those categories, including, I hate to say it for the Democrats that don't know it, including most Democrat politicians.
Yep.
Up to and possibly even including Hillary and Bill Clinton, although they've done an enormous things to advance the cause of communist China and Russia to some extent as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that was the last bit of that. But
well, let me say one more thing. He we've heard the ends justify the means.
Oh yes, yep.
That was Sergei Nechayev's slogan. He's the one who came up with that. Or it's not. He didn't create it, but he used it as his own, and that has been the Democrats' modus operandi ever since.
Yep.
And the thing about him is he put this all in a 3-page document. Now you go to the next people, the influencers, on the next page there, and you have 2 people that you probably never heard of, Willie Munzenberg and Georgie Lukács. Antonio Gramsci, everybody's heard of. He wrote a 3,000 prison notebook that he was arrested by the Italians. He was a leading Italian communist who was arrested by the Italians in the 20s, spent the rest of his life in prison, died in like 1937, I think. But in the meantime, he wrote this 3,000-page treatise that basically called for the communists to establish a war of positions in the institutions of society. Well, guess where he got that from? He got that from Nechayev, who in one paragraph said, we must penetrate all the different institutions of society while pretending to go along. We must get in there and subvert every one of them. And it took Gramsci 3,000 pages to write what Nechayev had written in one paragraph. Yeah. And most people never read the prison notebooks until they were translated over a period of 20 years by a guy who was the head of the American Gramscian Society, a Marxist college professor at Notre Dame, whose name was Joseph Buttigieg. And guess who he was?
Pete Buttigieg's dad.
Pete Buttigieg's dad. That's the guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
No surprise there, really.
Yeah. So the other 2 guys, Willie Munzenberg, is very important. He was that day's version of George Soros. He was called the Red Millionaire, and he had hundreds of newspapers and theaters and other outlets that promoted the Soviet line all throughout Europe. He was the guy who came up with the Popular Front concept. For example, the Hollywood Anti-Nazi League. He sent a guy named Otto Katz, who was a KGB assassin, to go to Hollywood and recruit famous actors and actresses, which he did because apparently he was a charming guy and a ladies' man in addition to being an assassin. And so he did that.
Who did they recruit?
Oh, let's see. Lillian Hellman, Dashiell Hammett, Ernest Hemingway.
Hemingway?
Yeah, Hemingway. Yes, Hemingway. A lot of people. And so he was very important. His biggest contribution, which he did along with Georgie Lukács, was create the School for Social Research in Frankfurt, Germany, which is also known as the Frankfurt School. Yep. And Georgie Lukács was an interesting character because in 1919, he was the Minister of Culture in the Hungarian Soviet Republic. And as the Minister of Culture, and that nobody's ever heard of the Hungarians, Bolshevik Hungarian Soviet Republic because it only lasted 5 months. The Hungarians are so sick of them, they chased them out. And but he created, during his time there, something that he called cultural terrorism. And guess what it was? It was teaching explicit sex education to children in school and creating a nationwide campaign telling women to leave their husbands and go off and sow their wild oats.
Wow.
And this is in 1919. But the point is that he understood how to use sex as a weapon against culture. And it didn't work in the Hungarian Soviet Republic, but Lukács and Munzenberg convinced Lenin to underwrite the cost through the Communist International to create this communist school called the School for Social Research, to make it sound,
Right.
like nothing that it really was. It was a Marxist school, and it became known as the Frankfurt School. And in 1933, when Hitler took power, most of these communist professors were also Jewish, and so they fled and were resettled in New York at Columbia Teachers College and also at New York University under the New School for Social Research, which still exists to this day. And it was even led by Senator Bob Kerrey a while ago.
Wow.
And they brag of their Frankfurt School roots. And the Frankfurt School came up with something called critical theory.
Critical race. Well, it became critical race theory, right?
Well, it became critical race theory, critical legal theory, critical pedagogy, critical women's studies, critical Hispanic studies, critical this, critical that, critical that. It's about 100 different critical theories. Started with the critical theory in 1937 and then just metastasized. And but the whole idea was to criticize everything about Western society. And Marx had said, before he even wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1948, he had said, the issues of the day are not our concern. And you say, what? Wait a minute. That's what the whole Communist Manifesto was about, right? Saving the world from capitalism, right? No, the issues of the day are not our concern. Our concern is the ruthless criticism of everything existing. And we will not be less ruthless regardless of the consequences to us or the rest of the world. And so the critical theorists picked up Marx and took it from there, and they criticized everything about Western culture, everything about Western society. And then further down the road, different Marxists, Derek Bell, who was Obama's famous favorite college professor, created critical race theory.
Right. Critical
legal theory is now the main theory taught in law schools, not the U.S. Constitution. Critical legal theory. And now it gets you understand where all of these shockingly biased left judges come from, and the prosecutors,
right,
and the defense attorneys. These people are all down with critical legal theory, which is basically to destroy our society and our culture.
And then they make it precedent, and then they use precedent as if that's constitutional.
Absolutely.
You said something a minute ago. So Hitler came to power and these guys left. But now a lot of people, probably most of the people listening to this know, but some of them that haven't listened regularly don't realize the Nazis were communists as well. They were socialists as well. There was not a whole lot of difference. I mean, Nazi is National Socialist Party. What was the real difference between them and the Soviets? Was it just that one was primarily nationalist and the other was wanting worldwide communism? Was there really any difference other than that?
No, it was a competition for power, and of course Mussolini, the Italian leader who became part of the Axis, created fascism. And what is fascism? The Antifa folks call us fascists. Right. They call us Nazis. What is a fascist? He was a communist, but he realized that in 1920s Italy, he wasn't going to get elected as a communist.
Right.
So he came up with this idea of public-private partnerships with government basically allowing certain industries to remain private,
Right.
but just under their guidance and direction.
Yeah.
So the only difference was they weren't confiscating all private property. They were allowing some industries to remain private and profitable so that they could benefit the regime.
Right.
That's what a fascist was. And if you recall, that was one of Obama's big obsessions, was creating public-private partnerships.
Yep.
That is fascism. And the Nazi Party, the National Socialist Party, they were the fascists of Germany. And of course, the Nazis before World War II, they trained in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union helped them train pilots. They were actually working together even when the Nazis and the communists were fighting in the streets, when the Antifa
Right.
folks and the brown shirts were fighting in the streets. Behind the scenes, the Nazis and the Soviets were actually collaborating to the point where the Soviets would identify individuals that the Nazis could pick up, individual communists working for the Soviets that the Nazis could pick up and execute. That's how
Lord.
Yeah, that's how closely they were working together. And then, of course, there was the Hitler-Stalin Pact,
Right.
and which enabled them to both partition Poland, but they were supposed to invade at the same time, and Stalin held back for a couple of hours. So when the Nazis invaded, all of the agreements that all of the Western powers had were turned against the Nazis.
Right.
And Hitler realized he had been stabbed in the back by Stalin, and that's when he decided, okay, I'm going to get this guy.
Good Lord. So Antifa was actually created in that era. I mean, most of us, myself included, hadn't heard of it until, the last several years. So that's their lineage. And
Anti-fascist. Yeah.
Anti-fascist. So now, some of the other ways they've infiltrated here, the civil rights movement. Actually, let's cover this guy first. Let's cover Yuri's comments here.
That one quote I have there really summarizes everything. It's what we've been going through for the last 50 years: ideological subversion, psychological warfare. Yeah, and that's what I call it. I call it psychological terrorism, actually. It changes the perception of reality to such an extent that despite all the information out there, no one's able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. Doesn't that sound like COVID?
Yeah.
But it's much more than that.
Right.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Well, we don't have any reason to trust our government anymore. I mean, after COVID and after election scams, I mean, look, Trump's a great improvement in a lot of ways. I'm certainly glad that we didn't get stuck with Kamala Harris or Biden, but the deep state is embedded deep into all of our institutions, and Trump he's not been able to get rid of them yet. I don't know if he'll be able to get rid of them. So when his time is up, when he's no longer in office, if we don't get somebody, and first off, there's nobody else quite like him, they're still gonna be there. They're not gonna be gone in just a few years. They're still going to resurface, and they may even resurface stronger. I don't know, but it's just there's no reason to trust and have confidence in our government. And we see them doing, and I'll give you a perfect example of why it's hard to trust. And I should have covered this in the notes earlier. We've got, Trump mentioned that all the migrants that took over Europe has allowed them, and most of those migrants were Muslim. And those are the problems. Well, at the same time, he is trying to make alliances, trying to get financial investment in our country from countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Well, they're not communists, but they're not our friends either.
No.
Those are Islamic regimes that we don't need them investing in our country. So
Right.
it's just hard to have confidence in anybody running the show right now. We showed Yuri's statement here a few minutes ago,
Sure.
and I got a question for you. This just kind of popped up in my head. The Soviet Union supposedly fell in '91. Do you think that was that part of a ploy to just use a different tactic to spread communism? You think that's what it was?
Well, I absolutely know that's what it was. And the people that say that communism fell in 1991 have to back that up with facts, and they can't. Because the fact of the matter is that plan had been in the works for decades and was outlined, including the fall of the Berlin Wall, was outlined in a book written in 1984 called New Lies for Old, and by Anatoly Golitsyn, who was, when he came across in the 60s, when he defected, he was the highest level KGB defector ever to defect up to that point. And he was one of the few defectors that CIA counterintelligence actually believed was a genuine defector, because they've been sending tons of defectors over. And the way you tell if it's a real defector or if it's a fake defector, if it's a real defector, you never see his face in public. You never learn where he lives. He is shuffled away somewhere remote, or he gets killed.
What about Yuri?
Huh?
What about Yuri, what about this guy?
Oh, that guy. Well, that was in Canada. So that was maybe a little bit different.
Okay.
He was in Canada. So maybe he had more protection in Canada, or maybe he felt free to say what he said. I don't know. Everything he said was absolutely right.
Right.
But for the most part, when they come over, they don't like to show their faces. They don't like to tell you where they are. And I don't know how he died. He came out with that in 1984. I don't know what the facts are concerning his death. It wouldn't surprise me if he, got some assisted suicide out of a, hotel window or something.
Right. Right.
I don't know, but so many guys have come across and they're just open and they're out there.
Right.
And the trouble is, most of the folks in the CIA aren't knowledgeable enough, and they also want to get credit for,
right.
Hey,
yeah, we brought a defector.
This guy in. And so the egos get involved. It's messed up.
You mentioned earlier about the attacks on traditional family.
Yeah.
And because you got the LGBT type Q stuff and, attacking the family, which includes attacking the children. We have a huge child suicide problem now. And I mean, that's something that was unheard of in decades ago.
Yeah. Think about this. Think about what they are subjected to. They're told we're all going to die in 10 years if global warming isn't taken care of. Well, if we're all going to die, then why go to school? Why are they going to school every day? They have to ask themselves.
You might get killed at school.
Yeah, right. And that's another thing.
Yeah.
But why go to school? And then boys can be girls. All of these things that just instinctively we reject. We're having forced down our children's throats, and having parental rights to protect their children from that kind of thing stripped from them. It's just insane, but it's not insane. It's a method to the madness. What's the best way to terrify, terrorize, and demoralize a society? It's to take its children.
Yep.
It's to destroy its children.
Yep.
And that's what they're doing. That's how absolutely brutal and sadistic these people are about seizing power. And I have nothing but contempt for them. They don't deserve to be Americans. They don't deserve to be in this country. In fact, a couple of my suggestions in that book, which the solutions chapter
Right.
is longer than all the other ones. It has endless lists of things. One is we need to more sharply define and broaden our definition of subversion and make the laws very, very strong and enforce those laws, enforce the laws against them, because that's what we're seeing.
Right.
You know, in some cases we're seeing outright treason, but in most cases, what we're seeing is subversion. And all the people that are engaged in this could be charged with subversion. I think.
Do we not already have laws on the books? Are we just not?
Yes, we do,
Yeah.
but they don't get enforced, and they're weak. They're weak and vague, and that allows the the lawyers to opens a door wide enough to drive a truck through, and so we need to strengthen those laws. I mean, it's just sick what they're doing. It really is a modern day Moloch. We are sacrificing our children, and it's horrific. It is absolutely horrific. And then when you add to that the widespread abundance of fentanyl and other
Right.
deadly drugs, we have the fentanyl crisis, and the more people killed by fentanyl every year than were killed during the entire Vietnam War. I mean, it's just ungodly. And when it comes to the child, teaching elementary and middle school children about homosexuality with explicit books that show kids in the act, that's child pornography.
Yeah,
Those people should be getting arrested for peddling child pornography. And my only question is, why haven't they been arrested yet for peddling child pornography and spend the next 30 years in jail?
I'm going to hit on that I want to hit on that real quick, because we had this issue in Tennessee. We passed a law. Now, a lot of the laws that Tennessee passes, the T stands for toothless, okay, just like we talked about. We had a law passed that prevented schools from showing material that was obscene, okay? And they gave a reasonable definition of obscenity, okay, in accordance with our state law. And they passed that law, and they couldn't get prosecutors to do anything about it. And I talked to my state senator about it, and who I have a low opinion of the guy, but I'm going to just tell you what he said. Well, we can't do that because of the Supreme Court's Miller test. We can't just we can't just decide that we have to go through that process, because certain things that are obscene, it all depends. It may have some, and this is my words, there may be some redeeming or artistic quality of it. And so we have to apply the Supreme Court Miller test to all of these things. We can't just go in and clamp down. And that goes back to what you said a minute ago about the judiciary. This is insane. And that's another problem at the state level, that we would allow the Supreme Court to dictate to our state what is obscene, what is pornographic.
They don't have the right to do that.
No.
The Supreme Court doesn't have the right to impose that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as the abortion decision.
Yeah.
That was wisely overturned, because that is a states' rights issue.
Yeah, as is marriage.
Yeah, as is marriage. Well, I don't think the government should even be involved in that. I think we should just follow the traditional definition of marriage, period. But even if you're just talking pornography, it's still illegal for children to see it.
Right.
And
If you or I showed it to them, we'd be in jail, but they can do it in school.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that, I don't understand why that doesn't hold for teachers and administrators that promote this absolutely
Right.
gross stuff.
You sent us a clip from Charlie Kirk, and it's relevant to this discussion. We're going to go ahead and play that clip real quick, and then we'll follow up with some more, if that's okay.
That's fine.
What the Democrats are doing is a deliberate plan of destruction against the United States of America. This is not that Joe Biden does not, well, he doesn't really know where he is, but that's a separate issue. His team knows what they're doing. They hate the country. They have bitterness for this republic. And they are making intentional steps to ruin it. In the 1970s, there were two Marxist communist political philosophers, Cloward Piven, who wrote a document saying that we are going to turn America into a communist country by doing three things. We will destroy the US dollar by printing trillions of dollars we do not have. We will build a deep state of government agents that will go after everyday citizens and that will absorb the private sector. And we will open up the southern border of the United States to allow tens of millions of third worlders to come into the country. This is called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Trillions of dollars we do not have. A deep state administrative state that is destroying the country and is locking up our political dissidents and allowing the third world to come into America. It is not a mistake or an accident what Joe Biden is doing. It is intentional, and therefore it is evil what he is doing. He is a traitor to the United States of America.
So Cloward Piven, illegal immigration, deficit spending.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved what he said. I was on a show a couple of years ago, and he read my book, The Red Green Axis 2.0, which is, well, if you want to read a book about immigration, it was published in 2019, but it still has more facts probably than any other book on immigration that's ever been written. It's just stacks of facts, stacks of figures on the funders, the organizations that are behind it, the various strategies, and it's all a Cloward-Piven strategy. And the Cloward-Piven, Richard Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, really got their fame began when they wrote a 1966 article called "The Weight of the Poor: A Strategy to End Poverty." And Richard Cloward, pictured there, most people don't know this, was the inspiration for Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program, which was the vast expansion of welfare. And but Cloward and Piven, Francis Fox Piven, his wife, standing next to him to his left, they hated welfare. They said welfare is dousing the fires of rebellion. And so they didn't like welfare. But so how was it that Richard Cloward was the inspiration for the Great Society program that vastly expanded welfare? Well, it was because they knew that a vast expansion of welfare would put increasing burdens on all segments of government if people demanded all the public services they were entitled to under the Great Society. Yeah. And Cloward and Piven hoped that those demands for services would reach the point where the government would collapse, and in the ashes, they could promote their solution, which would have been guaranteed annual income for all people in the United States. And at that time, what they were talking about was between $40,000 and $80,000 a family in today's dollars.
Wow!
And the thing about this, this strategy to create crisis is that their solutions always create a bigger crisis, and that is
Yep.
deliberate.
Yep.
And of course, so how could giving everybody in the country between $40,000 and $80,000 a year, whether they worked or not, be less expensive than the welfare program? It wouldn't.
Right.
And would the welfare program go away? No.
No.
It would just be added on top. So it would just create this massive, massive weight. And so, but, you know, we have such a resilient economy. That only worked. It worked in New York City, drove New York City to bankruptcy in 1975. And Cloward and Piven were named by Rudy Giuliani as economic saboteurs, which is what they were.
Right.
But their idea was, when the whole thing collapsed and people who had long since become dependent on welfare to survive would riot in the streets and become their own street army for their communist revolution.
Yep.
And
I'm sure the illegals figured into that, the illegal aliens.
well, yeah, you know, so it started with welfare, and then they went into voting, and Cloward and Piven wrote the Motor Voter Act, the National Voter Registration Act, which is an unconstitutional act. It imposes a national law on all of us and basically requires governments, state and local governments, to become voter registration drives for low-income people, which of course benefits the Democrats.
Right.
And but it also it's so complicated that it creates the opportunities for groups to turn in massive numbers of phony ballot registrations to overwhelm election officials with bogus registrations that will make it difficult for them to, count the votes during election time. And so they have an answer for that. Automatic voter registration, where everybody just gets voted automatically, registered. And then you have people, that have moved 2 or 3 times. They'd be registered 3 or 4 times in different states. You'd have dead people, and you'll have all that stuff, on the rolls now, and it doesn't get cleaned up. That was all Cloward Piven's idea. And then they went into the financial business by promoting subprime mortgages through ACORN, the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, founded by Wade Rathke, who was an acolyte who was mentored by Richard Cloward. And then Richard Cloward helped him create ACORN. And ACORN's job was, one of its jobs was to mess up the voting by turning in millions of bogus registrations, Donald Duck and so forth. But right here, you see a picture, and this is a private picture taken in the White House of Bill Clinton and Wade Rathke together in the same room, and they were planning together the subprime mortgage crisis, and just by basically making subprime mortgages available to anybody and everything. You remember the Ninja, no income, no job, no assets loans.
Right.
They would give out to people. They gave them out to illegal aliens. They gave them out to everybody. And so it was only a matter of time before the financial system was going to collapse under its own weight. And the banks, which didn't want to do this, were basically told by Janet Reno's Department of Justice that if they did not do it, they were going to get all kinds of audits. They were going to have more problems they could deal with. So that was the stick. And then the carrot was that the government-sponsored enterprise of the General National Mortgage Association, Ginnie Mae, and the Federal National Mortgage Association, Freddie Mac, would underwrite.
Meaning the taxpayers would underwrite.
Yeah. Underwrite all of those mortgages to the tune of $3 trillion.
Good Lord.
And when everything collapsed in 2008, guess what the government owed about $3.7 trillion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we have 37 trillion in debt altogether, and our interest
Yeah,
on the
right.
debt is
Right.
approaching a trillion.
Yeah.
Go back to
Well,
the 60s a little bit with the civil rights movement, because the communists also infiltrated the civil rights movement. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, no, absolutely. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, founded in the 1920s, was founded by white socialists. The only black on the board of the NAACP was W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a communist. And they got money from the Garland Fund, which was created by this wealthy guy, just inherited a bunch of money in Garland, and he just threw it in a fund and said, "Do whatever you want with it." And so people on the board included William Z. Foster, who at the time was the head of the Communist Party USA.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote a book called Towards Soviet America, which freaked out Stalin so much because it so much gave away the game that
Wow.
they literally went into libraries and bookstores and either bought or stole every book in existence. And this was in the 30s when it was written, and it didn't come back until Congress. They had a few copies. They did a reprint in the 1960s so we could see what William Z. Foster had actually said. But if people had read it in the 30s, they would have been horrified.
Wow. You know, I saw on YouTube, there's this guy, I think his name is Chad Jackson. He's a black guy from Texas, and he's working on a documentary. It talks about all the communist involved. Basically, MLK and his crew were communist. And I'm like, hats off to this guy. Here's a black guy who is no doubt going to catch hell for exposing the truth. But I think it's important that those kind of things come out. We don't have a lot of time left. I do want to hit a little bit on the Red-Green Alliance. I don't think you did an actual chapter in that book, but you do mention about the fact that the Marxists and the Muslims are on the same team against us. If you could hit that a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, like all partnerships between the communists, there's always a junior partner and a senior partner. And the senior partner is and always has been the communists. They do not accept second place anytime that they partner with anybody else. And most people know that most of the radical Islamic groups are Muslim Brotherhood groups, okay?
Yep.
And the Muslim Brotherhood began infiltrating the United States in about 1964.
Yep.
And the first one was the Muslim Students Association.
Yep.
But there's hundreds of them.
Yep.
And but what most people don't know is the Islamic terrorists that we've all become familiar with since
Since 9/11.
since before that, with the hijacking of airplanes,
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
shooting of that Navy guy, and the
Yeah.
Lebanon,
The Iranian hostage crisis. That's
all of that stuff.
Yeah.
They were funded, trained, organized, and armed by the Soviet KGB after World War II. So the Islamic radicals basically became an arm of the KGB, and they remain an arm of the KGB to this day, even though you may want to call them the SVR or some other acronym, but it's all the same people. It's all the same thing. They are under the thumb of the communists, and they always have been. So that's why, when you have guys like Mamdani, who is a Muslim and a radical leftist, well, he's a radical leftist first, foremost, and always. And the same thing's true of Nihad Awad, who's the head of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is really the propaganda front group for Hamas in the United States.
Right, which is a terrorist organization.
Yeah, absolutely a terrorist organization. However, he was a member of Youth for Palestine before he became the head of CARE in 1993. In 1994, became the head of CARE. 1993, he was the leader of Youth for Palestine, which was a communist organization. Now, you don't go from being a communist one year to decide to be a Muslim believer the next year. You can change hats and make pretend, but the fact of the matter is he is still a communist, as was Yasser Arafat, as were most of the Palestine Liberation Organization, and the many other Palestinian groups. They were all under the thumb of the KGB, all guided by the KGB, and the KGB basically said, just, hey, go nuts. They just cut them loose, and they were able to go nuts throughout the world and create chaos, and gave the Soviets plausible deniability as to their influence and guidance of these groups. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who after who became the head of Al-Qaeda,
Right.
He was a Soviet agent. He was a KGB agent.
Let me ask you this, because I thought that I'd heard and it's been reported that ISIS was actually a CIA creation gone bad. Is there not any truth to that? Or is that some of the CIA that's KGB?
Well, there is that. There definitely is that.
Right.
A lot of the CIA has been penetrated. So a lot of what we see coming out of the CIA, especially during Trump's first term, with Brennan and Comey and all those, a lot of that's communist activity, and the CIA has been really seriously penetrated. But what was I going to say about it? Remind me, what was your question?
I'd have to wait for that train to come around as well, but we're running out of time. So, what are some of the things that we can do about this?
Well, like I say, we have to strengthen subversion laws. That's a really important thing. And one thing we have to recognize, I don't think that I think God gave us a chance. God gave us one last chance to save our country. Trump isn't perfect, but if we had gotten Biden for another 4 years, Biden was planning on outlawing all private business except for a few major companies that he was going to allow to continue. Well, what does that sound like to you?
Sounds like communism.
That's right. That's fascism. Yes, exactly. Public-private partnerships. He was going to allow just 2 or 3 companies to stay alive, and he was going to outlaw private business otherwise. That is a fact from one of the people who worked under him. So we have 2 to 4 years. We really better maintain a Republican Congress, because whatever you say about them, we have a Democrat Congress that's going to really impede Trump's ability to do anything.
Right.
And
I just like to say that's why it's important for states to step up, for people to elect states that recognize the 10th Amendment and that, there are limits on what the federal government's supposed to be able to do. But those limits don't enforce themselves, just like the subversion laws don't enforce themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we've been given between 2 and 4 years to fix things. And if you read my book, I couldn't go through them. I couldn't even list them in the time we have of all the things we can do. But there's about 30 things we need to do to reform the voting laws. Yep. The most important one is voter ID, and that can be done at the state level.
Yep.
So everybody in your state should be pressuring your state legislature to pass voter ID laws. That should be true of every state. That's the most important one. In education, we need to totally reform education, and I think throw those people in jail who are trying to pervert our children.
I'd agree.
And
absolutely.
Instead, teach reading, writing, teach the skills that they need to succeed, not the indoctrination they need to help the communists succeed.
Absolutely. Now, you have a website called crisisnow.net.
Crisisnow.net. Yep.
And your book, hey guys, you can get the book at Amazon, correct?
Yes,
Manufactured
that's
Crisis.
right.
And
And if you go to Crisis Now and you click on one of those images, it'll take you right to my author page at Amazon. But yes.
And I absolutely recommend this book. I mean, like I say, it is information packed, and it's 400 pages or less, but it covers all the top issues. You had another book coming out that's a lot lighter topic. That you wanted to.
If I could share. Let's see. How do I? Here we go. Whoops. I turned that off. Okay. Share. Where is it? All right. Where the heck did it go? Oh. Well, I have a new Christmas book. Just came out. And if I can share, am I sharing now?
No. I'll tell you, we will try to find it, and we can see if we can post it on our website later. But what's the title of it again?
It's called The Day That Christmas Didn't Come.
Well, maybe it's not as happy as I thought.
I can't share that. It's weird that I can't. Anyway, it's called The Day Christmas Didn't Come, and it is a story about a little girl that wakes up Christmas morning and there's no Christmas, and nobody even knows it ever existed. And she goes out to swing on her swing in the backyard, and the tree talks to her, and the tree tells her that the Christmas has disappeared because the spirit of Christmas has left the world. I think we could all agree that's pretty true these days.
Yeah,
and she has to go off on this journey to this place called the Inner Kingdom to see if she can save it. And it's a really exciting story. It's kind of like a cross between The Grinch Who Stole Christmas and The Hobbit or The Chronicles of Narnia. It is a full-length book, and it's a fantasy, and it's really good. And we are going to also try to make it into a full-length movie. But it's a great book for kids, great book for, instead of the stuff that they're putting out now is such awful stuff. I decided I just had to put this thing out now because it's so important to get back to our traditional values and all of the good things we used to know.
Absolutely. Hey, we are really hurting for time. We unfortunately have another guest. I should have booked you for at least an hour and a half, and then maybe we could have covered more of what we needed to. But I really appreciate you coming on. I hope that Christmas book does well. I encourage everybody to get your current book, and we'll definitely have you back on. We'll just go ahead and plan on having you back on. And so, once again, thanks for being with us, and thanks for all you do. Great information. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notification bell, so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Thanks again to Jonathan and Mary for their financial support for the month of July, August, and September, and thank them as well. They gave thanks on the super thanks and the super chat, and we really appreciate that. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. A few quick announcements. Meet and greet for Monty Fritz for governor, Wednesday, October 1st, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at 1900 South Germantown Road, Germantown, Tennessee. On October 2nd, Stewart and Henry Tennessee Firearms Association will meet at the VFW in Paris, Tennessee, 7 p.m. for our monthly meeting. Topic is the Bill of Rights. This is at 5212 East Wood Street. You don't have to be a member to attend. We'd love to see you. The Tennessee Constitutional Grassroots Coalition will host Freedom Fest Saturday, October 4th from 12 to 8 p.m. at the Tate and Lyle Performing Arts Center, 1470 Robertson Spring Road in Loudon, Tennessee. Go to tcgc1776.org for tickets. Our second show tonight at 8:30 will be retired Lieutenant Colonel Ed Kennedy. He joins us to talk about the illegal activity of the so-called naming commission that is actively trying to destroy our history and culture with a focus on Taliban Tai, a left-wing general bent on destroying all things Confederate. Next Monday, October 6th, the Tennessee Firearms Association Director of West Tennessee, Richard Archie, joins us to give us an update on the Hughes versus Lee case and the violation of our state constitution. Second show next week will be State Rep and now gubernatorial candidate Monty Fritz to talk to us about the campaign status of his campaign of more liberty and less government. And he'll tell us how everything is going. Hope you can join us. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.